Beautifully timed. We are into the first semifinal of this Corsair Cup. In the bottom right, as the blue Zerg repping Europe, it's SortOf. In the top left, as the yellow Terran repping Korea, it's KeeN. Alright, so KeeN, the last Korean left, SortOf already 2-0'd Billowy, and Penguin was 2-0'd by Zanster. I'd imagine ZvT is probably the most difficult matchup to kind of get over the hump of the server preference. This is default Europe, Corsair Cup always has been, and the Koreans wake up at or stay up, I don't know, either one, at a very bad time and decide to play with the worst possible lag they can have, actually. Even Korea to like NA East is not as bad. And Korea to NA West is oftentimes like not even much at all if you're on a good day. So they do it. They've been doing it for like a year now, and it doesn't seem to bother them anymore. But certainly there's been one or two times, especially in those high, action, high intensity fights like ZvT Knife Wars, where you'll be like, okay, that late baneling detonation seemed like it was not a problem of the player. In ZvT, certainly you can see late pickups on medevacs, or maybe the snipes and the banelings aren't as good, but you can never really know. Not as obvious. Thank you to Overwhelm for the Twitch Prime sub. I don't think I've missed too many resubs. Just follows here. No, I think I've actually been pretty good. Go me! I guess I missed that Wardy hosted the stream at the beginning of it, so that was my bad. But thank you if you're watching. Anyways, so KeeN versus SortOf. SortOf already took down Billowy, but Billowy is Protoss, so, you know, both Koreans, but very different races, very different matchups here. KeeN can go mech, but the mech that we've seen from him has been almost untested. It's pretty rare, I would say, for us to see pro gamers, these names that we recognize and have been around for a very long time, like KeeN and SortOf, Nurchio, Bly, whatever. It's very uncommon to see what seems to be a budding strategy from these guys. They usually have it well practiced on the ladder and through maybe other tournaments that we don't get to cast, which sometimes is impossible because like we're casting every day, but it does happen. And it's usually like fleshed out, just not like as powerful as their usual. But for KeeN, we've really seen what looks to be kind of a hey, I guess mech is the thing to do now, let me try it build from him, which obviously isn't very good to have in a tournament. It's been getting better every time we've seen it, and it is noteworthy that he is trying to go mech every now and then, but is it something that he's really going to stick on and really add into a best of 3 or best of 5? KeeN wasn't too much of a mech player even back when mech was a thing to do, as far as I remember. And to see him added in because it was kind of the flavor of the month is good. You know, be experimental and continue improving, but it can also be really bad if it's just not your style, right? It's just not something that's going to be fitting you. It's kind of like, it feels to me kind of like when, if you see Zest go for mass oracles, will it be that good? Because Zest has always been that kind of true and narrow, straight and narrow guy. So I don't know how well that would look. How good that would look. Anyways, theoreticals aside, we got a lot of Overload scouting coming in from SortOf. You really want to see if KeeN's going to go for a Hellbat push, which is totally legit. That's something that KeeN does a lot. It is just Hellion Banshee to the truest form. Hellions and Banshees with Cloak. Sim has been researched and is not being cancelled. It would be dangerous to do so anyway because these Overlords have speed and have nothing chasing them away. The opportunity of faking out SortOf would be kind of low. Just not a very big opportunity at all. Third Command Center on the front, always a little risky, but seems he did it okay. Hellions trying to harass both sides at once. Looks like SortOf does in fact have speed, so those lings were responding pretty quickly, and not much is being done here. SortOf still scouting, by the way. I mean, he really wants to know what KeeN is doing, and nothing is stopping him from it, so more power to him. Banshee is, I mean, I think, honestly, with how good Zergs are at dealing with Banshees nowadays, they always have extra queens, they always seem to have a, the Overseer in time. I feel like 6 drones is kind of respectable. I feel like I'm saying supposedly here. Is actually kind of good. Whereas a lot of the other times you'll see them absolutely do nothing. Maybe 1 or 2 drones off of a gas geyser and then die to a bunch of queens. So that's kind of the bar that I've set anyways for Banshees when I see them against a good Zerg player. Lair is done. Obviously you saw an Overseer. Spire's on the way, and a Bailey Nest as well. So sort of, you know, a European Zerg, and definitely had his months of going Roaches and Infestors. We have seen a lot more Mutilating Bling from them collectively, so that's what he's chosen to go for. And quite the, like, I don't know the right word is greedy, but, you know, this Bailey Nest really not a cautionary one. He just depends on his queens for his defense, and the scouting, the superb scouting he had with the quick overlord speed to tell him if he needed that early or not. I mean, this has started when his lair was, you know, already done, a little bit past that, so obviously significant hooks is where the question is, like, was that worth putting off? And, well, since KeeN is still waiting on his combat shield, still just, bulking up most of his army over here, it seems like that was the absolute correct choice. He'll have enough time to get to that baneling speed, and just enough creep spread to really make it work for the bases he's trying to get. He did manage to fall behind a little bit on the 1-1, though. But not too bad. Thank you to Nosneb782 for the 28-month resub, and Feathers for the Twitch Prime sub. Much appreciated. We're getting a lot of new subs, and we do appreciate it here. We've dipped down quite a bit. It's been a kind of feels bad month, so it feels good when we see those new subs. Well, looks like KeeN is going to push out maybe now. He is not going to push out his tanks yet, and he just has enough Marines to fit inside those medevacs. Does he know about the Spire? No, he has no idea about the
Upgrade complete.
Alrighty then. So that's the one problem, of course, with moving out delayed like this with medevacs, is medevacs are usually your instant out and no big deal, but if the mutas come out in, like, you know, 10, maybe 12, right off the bat, that's when you might, like, really regret moving out with the medevacs. Looks like the scan revealed a muta popping out, or just simply the army moving, I don't know what, but he does just leave the Xel'Nagas, go back to a defensive position, and sort of, well, I don't know if sort of really wants to attack off of creep. You really have to know what you're doing as a Zerg player to successfully do this, otherwise you're risking giving away a lot of units. I do want to, I guess, especially note that the tanks are here and still being produced, second factory on the way. It's tanks, not Widowmines. Tanks aren't as bad as they were, I guess, in Heart of the Swarm to go up against Mutilating Bling. They were better when you could pick them up. You can't, they're okay, but they definitely aren't the usual thing if you know way ahead of time that you're facing someone who goes Mutilating Bling. So I do wonder if there is maybe guesswork going down of his roaches, or he just really wanted to go tanks. Either way, that's where he's at now, grabbing a Thor 2, going for a very classic composition. Adding 1 or 2 Thors can soak up a lot of banelings with mishandling from the Zerg player, and most importantly, can help steer those mutas away from the army. Changelings. I was wondering how Marines were surviving in the middle of the map here. Well, I was gonna try and make a fancy tweet, but I'm just gonna make a really lame tweet. There we go. Did I miss anything? Nope, perfect. So these mutas have grown quite a bit in number, up to 18. That is enough to really threaten the main base, add-ons, supply depots, you name it. Definitely enough to have to respond seriously with a lot of Marines. So attacks with Lings, the other sides are always going to be dangerous. Almost grabbing that command center, in fact. But this is a lot of control given to SortOf. He has not felt pressure since the Hellions, really. Scan goes down. I think KeeN's recognized how this game is going to go without the pressure starting nice and early and effectively. he's probably not going to be able to rally push down the middle of the map, so he's got to do one big push when he's maxed out while getting his 4th base and preparing for whatever hive tech SortOf has. SortOf not really doing the best job with his mutas, though. Not realizing that KeeN was pushing forward on the map, let them just dilly-dally and took quite a few really bad shots from the Thor. So now he's down to 11. Still enough to snipe medevacs and tanks in this case, but not nearly as scary for counters. So only Lings will be what KeeN has to worry about. Now KeeN, he has this maxed out army. It's before ultras, but there is so much creep to clean up, and reinforcing this is going to be a pain on such a large map like Ascension to Ire. As you can see, he is probably in the most surroundable position in most maps. And that's exactly what's going down there. He only has 3 tanks, 2 of them joining now, but not sieged up. They do not take on a lot of the Banelings at all. In fact, most of the bio is what the Banelings hit, which is exactly what they wanted. Lings help clean up the Marauders. Mutas can help that too. And all SortOf needs is another flood of Lings that'll take out that Thor. Looks like he contributed some of those Lings to a counter. So the 4th base lives, but 13 SCVs die. Not too shabby, because he also cleaned up the main army. KeeN, recognizing he's about to be surrounded, lifts up what he can, I guess most importantly that Thor, and gets out of there. So SortOf, gotta get back to spreading that creep. He wants that area to be full of creep. That's another area that will be continually abused. If they're not attacking to the north, then they're gonna start expanding to the south, and thus attacking to the south. So SortOf doesn't bother even taking this base, which I kind of like. Takes this one. So that means that they're gonna have to go through the middle of the map on this plateau and then kind of take a right, which, not so bad for the Terran, is an okay attack path. It's still a big map though with open spaces, and that's what makes the later games hard for the Terran. Ultras are almost ready to go also. So, most importantly, because that's the best addition to the Terran army, so good thing that KeeN has a 4th base and a planetary, but does he have a response to these ultras? The Chitinous plating is almost done. 3-3. I guess that's actually 3 carapace and adrenal glands. The lanes will be quite a lot to get through, and KeeN, he needs to really pressure, but he also needs to take the ultras seriously. And unfortunately, the ultras were maybe paid a little too close attention to. He missed the Banelings. That all crashed into his army. Lings get on top of his production. Mutas, whichever ones are left, get on top of the production as well. And KeeN is just not looking too hot. Half the army supply, and a lot of that supply is in medevacs. GG. SortOf takes game number 1. Pretty straightforward game, I would say. KeeN not able to do that early game damage or really commit hard to the mid game. Loses out in the late game. Kind of a classic scenario for ZvT. That's gonna give KeeN the map choice, so he should know to message me about it. As a reminder, Bly's answer from the other semifinals: best of 3, into a best of 5. KeeN chooses Interloper on the new maps. Forgot who I was inviting for a second. There we go, SortOf. This might just be a ZvZ finish, which, hey, it's a European Cup, not too unexpected. See someone talking about up-to-date replays. Indeed, probably the best place to really get replays, I guess, nowadays, and also contributes to the StarCraft 2 scene, is from a lot of the streamers. So we give out the replays of our tournaments unless specifically told not to. For instance, maybe Lima Leagues gives their own, or maybe WCS wants to package them all together and give them out themselves, something like that. But for instance, this cup, we will give out the replays. If that is something that is worth subbing for you, then you gotta sub now. Actually, we've been kind of liberal about giving old replays to new subs if they ask, but do it now, and that'll just make it easier for both of us. I know a couple other streamers give out their replays. That's kind of the best way to go, I think. In the interest of not giving my competitors money, I guess. I won't mention the really cool replay site that Team Liquid works with build orders. You're gonna have to figure that one out yourself. Anyway, it's game number 2, and in the bottom right, he's down 1. It's the yellow Terran, KeeN. In the top left, as the blue Zerg, he is SortOf. So SortOf showing supreme control of that last game. Mutas didn't really look that amazing, but his early game defense into late game ended up working out perfectly, so good game by him. KeeN, classically, this guy has been playing in a lot of our tournaments for years now, I guess, at this point, and classically has had problems really adapting to that late game. Why? Well, initially, all Terrans had problems adapting to the late game. You had Byun really be the first guy to be like, maybe I can make it work, and then you had Ryung go mass Marauders, and that kind of did a thing sometimes, and then you Thermal tried mass tanks, and that was kind of cool occasionally, whatever. And now you have maybe a little bit more pressure in that mid-game, where the top tier Terrans are just relentless, and that's what's getting them wins. You know, you see Innovation relentless with the mid-game, the amazing Zerg player defends until the late game and actually gets ultras, but because Innovation is literally a god, he just attacks until the Zerg is like, okay, I give up. Like, I can't do this anymore. That's a hard thing to copy, you know? KeeN's a good player and all that, has definitely his good days, but it's hard to just recognize that your aggression is going to be 10 times more difficult. You didn't start early enough. It wasn't good enough early enough. It's a big map, and you can't really make up for the early game. Do you continue attacking and just lose all your units and die? Do you 3-base all in and die? Or do you try and go into the late game and die? Well, KeeN chose the latter response. And unfortunately, he chose maybe the aggression at the wrong time. That could have been the one major problem. He should have waited for Liberator, he should have waited for Ghosts, etc, etc. Now I talk about the late game, because it is such a common problem for a lot of these Terrans that aren't quite like on the top level. But Interloper, interesting map choice, probably one of the least chosen maps along with Catalina so far. Not a very old map pool at all. It's still quite new, so I can't confidently say that not everyone's choosing it, but it does feel less chosen, more vetoed. It's a bit of a small map. It has a lot of chokes and a lot of avenues of attack, so while the chokes can sometimes work in favor of, you know, a bio army with tanks, they can also work against the Terran player since Ling run buys can be problematic. It's a lot like Terraform. I remember it because it's literally you're terraforming the map. In that it has rocks to break down, and it kind of has like this almost circular pattern, spiral pattern happening in the middle of the map. But it's, you know, something they could also break down again and still bother you with. KeeN Generate block. Don't see this too often versus Zerg. Well, he sees a drone, so he knows that their base is intended to be taken. Stim is on the way for KeeN. Now, he went for a very greedy third base, which has not been scouted yet by SortOf. Oh, just kidding. Yes, it has. When did it do that? Okay, I don't know. I missed something. That's my bad. But it was scouted entirely. Even without the Overlord speed this game, so. The thing is, like, some Zerg players take that as a go-ahead and go for, like, a Nidus Worm all-in or a Baneling bust. But more often you see it just as an okay go to a macro really hard, and a lot of Zergs don't really mind that. The Terran player also has a superb macro game. It's not always the Zerg's favor when they are given free reign, but it is always, I think, scarier to say I'm going to let the Zerg player do whatever they want. But maybe I'm like, inherently biased as a Terran player, so there is that option. That's usually the stereotype, though, I know that much. So the Zerg player with 70 drones and 5 bases is scarier than the Terran player with 60 SCVs and 3 bases. Obviously, that's a stereotype and not always true. This was the weirdest wall because he realized he should have walled off tighter sooner. but he's fixing it now. Hellions will be able to take out the Lings, actually, so they end up backfiring on SortOf a little bit. And he doesn't really want to remake those because he knows the 3cc and he wants to try and get away with as much greed as possible. But he also has to take the Hellions seriously, even though it's very uncommon for those Hellions to get a lot of drone kills. Usually queens are on top of things. Get out of here, Overlord. Fourth base taken to the north. As I said, like, I don't see this map very often. I haven't played this map very often, and I'm not quite sure where I guess the map, the base layout would be, but I think this is the most common one so far. Obviously, this one is kind of going to your opponent with the attack path going right here. And their expansions usually go over here. So yeah, this one is still kind of like the farthest one away from your opponent, which is what the Zerg want to be. Obviously, this one's not, and this one's not a very good choice. It's a questionable choices. Rocks being broken down allow for bigger concaves and less of a choke. We do have KeeN once again going for tanks. I really didn't know about the tanks versus Mutilating Bling last game, or Ling banding in general, I guess, because we gotta remember Hydras are a thing too. It's a big map, and I just don't like it versus that composition as much as Widow Mines. But on a map like this, a bit smaller, not as many opportunities to get huge surrounds, a lot more chokes, this is where I do like tank pushes. And if KeeN's really precise and smart and, you know, scouts ahead and knows where to siege up his tanks, gets him in a good position, then I think he can do quite well. Apparently Interloper has some AI issues. This tank is like, let me just do nothing and die. Luckily, SortOf is in the middle of the map either. In fact, SortOf isn't close to where KeeN is attacking at all. He is defending his fourth base, thinking there's going to be like a medevac opportunity. It's not. The army's over here, being very awkward. This army is actually really awkward. But it's about to be very scary. I don't know why it's sieged up there. Now it's sieging up in a much more abusive spot, right up against that choke. You can take out the rocks, or I guess you could just try and use them against the Zerg player. Now, there aren't mutas, there are Hydras. Mutas could duck around this pillar and maybe try and take out medevacs and tanks. Hydras can't do the same thing. Instead of being really, really good position. The only thing that would make this better is the Bailey Nest is a little bit closer. If he was taking that out, that could be quite good. He sees its Hydras, but unfortunately can't pick up the medevac in time. Lings come in from the back. Target firing the Banelings takes those out, but they still manage to get on top of the tanks a little bit and take two of them down. Not too shabby. That's now not a strong enough position for KeeN to hold, and he's going to back off. Sort of accidentally using his Banelings on the rocks. Yep. Could have been worse. That was only two. KeeN has walled off and is only worrying really about... okay, never mind. He's using this attack path. He still has this entire area to worry about run-bys, but now is changing his attack path to the right side. No? No? Really? But that's where he expanded, KeeN. I don't know. He really wants to abuse his choke, I guess, which is all well and good. I just worry because, well, this puts you, like, this isn't really the strongest rally through the middle of the map. Like, Lings could easily bar this off, and they could also run by into your natural and main. Where if he went this way, then I feel like SortOf and him are just kind of butting heads in one position more often. Might be getting a little over analytical though. I mean, the point is he's trying to abuse an area with his tanks, which aren't even in high number anymore. He never went for a second factory? He never went for a second factory. Okay. Yeah, two tanks isn't that scary, but now joined up with other siege units like Liberators, that's okay. SortOf is breaking down rocks, which is scouted, so is a large Baneling force. We have SortOf with better upgrades than KeeN. +2, Carapace already done. Hive already 75% done, a little bit more than that. And KeeN is not yet on a fourth base. He added on more production, so he's going a lot harder to 3 bases. Now, this isn't as abusive as a choke at all. In fact, this might be one of the widest parts on Interloper, but it is still not the biggest concave, especially if he runs back into his tanks and liberators. He does run back at the last seconds. There we go, continuing to run back and back and back. It's off of creep and sort of went way too far forward. It's also really questionable because while that was a huge concave, he wasn't actually under any threats. I guess the threat is literally not letting him get to this position, so I guess I gotta take that back a little bit. But I definitely think he could have retreated faster, realized it wasn't going to go as well faster. Instead, he threw a lot of his banelings chasing those Marines behind the tank line, behind the Liberator line, and lost a very, very large portion of his army. Now this position is abused with a greater army than sort of. GG, KeeN takes game number 2. Interloper, I feel it's going to be a map kind of still being figured out in a lot of matchups. It does have that interesting terrain where it can change based off how you break down the rocks and how you expand and which attack path you choose. So, sort of loses a game. But now it will be his map choice. And it's going to be the ace match. It's kind of a long game, so I'm going to take a quick 2-minute break. See you as soon as the lobby's ready. Welcome back. It is the ace match. We're on Mech Depot. In the top right is the yellow Terran. It's KeeN. In the bottom left has the blue Zerg. It is SortOf. So SortOf chooses Mech Depot, and we've seen this map chosen quite a bit. Actually has some, I guess, complications for the defending player, which I'm gonna say KeeN is sometimes. He's actually quite active on the map last time, and that did give sort of potential opportunities to run by and use Interloper's multiple pathways. Never really happened. Mech Depot is a bit larger of a map, so you don't feel as cornered just by a simple, step out of line by the Terran player. I feel like if the Terran player moves at all on a small map like Interloper, the Zerg player is already like, oh, okay, like I gotta make like a ton of lings and shit, like, oh god. But on a bigger map, you can, definitely depend more on your creep spread and these wide open areas that they have to be very cautious about, which, KeeN was kind of just running around the map, not really a care in the world, sieging randomly and going, tank AIing in the wrong place. There wasn't a lot of pressure on his side. But if on Mech Depot he does the 3 base again and does the solid push out once he has, like, 3 tanks, 4 tanks, that's where I think sort of he does have the opportunity to use his creep spread against KeeN. When KeeN's aggressive, he's defensive. When KeeN's defensive, then he's controlling the map, taking a lot of bases, spreading that creep spread, looking for attacks on the 3rd base, which is kind of wide open. Not too bad of a choke. I don't know if, I've heard some Terrans say they don't like this map as much, despite it being called Mech Depot and thus sounding like a Terran player map. But I don't think it's right to say any map is particularly balanced to one or the other. This map pool has so far been looked upon quite favorably by all the pros. So there's a big difference between that last game and the first game. KeeN was entirely defensive. Last game, he was always on the map. And one definitely worked out better than the other, but it could have heavily been influenced by KeeN's map choice. He chose the right map for his win. Obvious example of that one. Did SortOf choose the right map for his win. The 3rd base is like a little, like a kind of obnoxious ways away. It's not the worst thing to take, but obviously you go down a ramp and up a ramp, and this has a large portion here where you have to, you have to worry about. For the Zerg player, the creep spread gets over here fairly quickly. It's not so bad to take and even get to a 4th base. For a Terran, or especially a Protoss player, that's where it's a little more suspicious. If you do respond to the 3rd base, then they run into your natural, or vice versa. If you leave your units right here, then they get a surround or something like that. So I don't know if KeeN's going to be going, well, I do know already. KeeN's not going for the fastest 3rd command center possible, not like last game. He could still go for kind of the fast one. Medevac drops, so Hellion drops the choice There is a lot of open space on Interloper in the main. That's why SortOf is sending his overlords already, spreading them out a little bit. Okay. Hellions going to poke and prod initially, and actually that medevac, was he building Marines too? No. So I didn't expect the armory just because he wasn't building Marines from that barracks. But he is building an armory in the natural, under plain sight of the Overlord. Alright then. But without the Marine support, which he could have had like 3 or 4 Marines supporting this. If he wanted, but he decided not to build them. Okay. Well, medevac does pick up the Hellions, elevates them to join the rest of their buddies, and is going to be going for a Hellbat attack, just Hellbats. Unfortunately, just Hellbats, while they are scary with the medevac healing, just isn't not quite the same without those Marines, or higher numbers. 6 is like respectable, but not super great. The Marines add just a little bit of extra DPS, so the Queens really have to take everything seriously and spread out and worry about literally dying. Against the Hellbats, he actually just kept them all clumped up and was like, come at me, bro. This is a huge mistake by KeeN. The third base can be difficult to take, even when it's being lifted over safely. To put it on location was just really taking a lot of faith that the Hellbat push would distract SortOf and keep all of his units at home. Which, hey, most of the time it does. Most of the time the Zerg player takes the Hellbat attack very seriously, and even maybe too seriously. But SortOf had 100% faith in his Queens, and went for a counterattack that just worked out so well. I mean, that command center's not on location, that counterattack is kind of like, okay, whatever, it checked and then it left. With the on location, that was a huge blow. 100 minerals plus all that time. That was like 75% done. Rocks being broken down already? It's interesting. A lot of Hellions. Like, you started at 6, but I guess it's up to 8 now? Yeah, 8. Before swapping that factory over? No, he's still producing Hellbats. Alright, well, you know, I was kind of critiquing his tank usage in that first game. The second game, I think it made a lot more sense, and we saw it make really good headway, so that was a powerful move. But the third game, he goes for Hellbats. That's not something we've seen since, like, 2014. Flash was using them. They just aren't really enough splash to be worth it. And since they also naturally clump, Banelings aren't actually that bad against them. Now, I think you do want a surplus of Banelings when you go up a style like this, where maybe against Widow Mines or tanks, it's actually a lot more about concave and even Ling control. I think when it's Hellbat Marine, you just pile on as many Banelings as possible, and there's not much they can do. They can try and split and spread, but I feel like the production is always one out for the Terran or the Zerg player if they recognize that's what you're doing. If you get the jump on them, if you're like, hey, here's 15, 16 Hellbats, what are you gonna do? And they're, you know, only making Lings, well then that's their problem. But now that he saw how many Hellbats there were and no Widow Mines, he doesn't have to worry about that one shot killing 15 Banelings. As I say that, KeeN starts to get Widow Mines, but the idea is still there for this attack. That attack in the main base didn't work out. Thank you to Genkai972 for the 19-month resub, and BMW Nick1 for the 6-month resub, and Treebreaker 3-month resub. I moved my PC outside to watch the Corsair Cup and the Eclipse at the same time. And then we had Feathers, who was a new sub. Don't remember if I got that. Thank you all very much. Some creep spread cleanup going on the left side. Top left? What? Top left? Sure. That's That's their correct position. But instantly replanted because the creep spreading queens haven't been touched. KeeN finally has his third base up and running, but obviously it's not even saturated. He has been going pretty hard on the attack and not so much on the SV production, so that it's actually Ryung was doing this thing where he would get a third base, but he would only make like 6 extra SCVs, so he had like a surprisingly low SCV count, and it was an all-in. It never worked when I saw it, as cool as the idea was. I'm not sure if KeeN is trying to do that, because he is like mostly saturated now that his SCVs are, you know, not building anymore. But like, in an unintentional way, it kind of looks that way, because he didn't get the third base for so long, and it took him a while to actually get an OP saturation. Whatever that is, he does have it up and running, and he'll have SCVs to transfer over, I suppose, once his main mine's out. Much more importantly, we have a huge stack at the front lines, and KeeN did have a supply lead. He also has an upgrade lead with 2-2. SortOf has like 8 seconds to go for his own. He just took out most of the Wood Mines, though. He just actually physically took them out by killing them, and has cleaned up the rest of the Marine Force. The Hellbats didn't end up adding enough. The Wood Mines didn't get good enough shots, and the Lings and Hydras and Queens will be enough to send KeeN packing. I don't know if he really has a follow-up attack after this. SortOf is still on 4 bases, 76 drones, with his 2-2 finally done, and a hive that is basically done. Looks like KeeN's gonna grab himself a couple of queens. That's something, stop the creep spread for his next attack, but he is just trying to rally as hard as possible through the middle. His medevacs, they're alive, but they're all dry, and they are getting shot down by the Hydras. Banelings, a lot of them do roll into that one Marauder, but SortOf's production should be able to outmatch KeeN. In fact, KeeN never really got enough production to support 3 bases. Again, not even fully saturated on his third, but with mules, I guess, and the transfer, he would be. Stayed only at 5 barracks. Generally, it is 2 base saturation, 5 barracks, 3 base saturation, 7, plus like a second factory or second star point or something. I think you'd actually get 7 barracks production off of a fully saturated 2 base, but that's like really all in, I think. The point is, KeeN's banking a ton, and that has to do, I think, with his amount of barracks. He also probably maybe skipped a couple of starport production rounds, and he wasn't producing as many SCVs as we would usually see. He never went up to 60 or 65. But despite that, he's trying to get to a 4th CC? That's weird. Alright. I'm not sure he's really going to be able to stay any longer in this game, though. Wood Mine's not being detected, get a couple pot shots, but that's a lot of Hydras, and that is game. GG. So SortOf does end up taking the 2-1 and advances on to the finals. The other semifinals would be a ZvZ between Bly and Zanster. And that's what I'll be getting into next. I think they have the lobby already set up, so real quick, 2-minute break. Thanks for watching, everyone.